Only 1% of people retire before they turn 50 years old. But the 1% of people who do retire early are often not doing anything exceptional. It's just that the other 99% of people are trapped in the same few habits that are keeping them broke. So my promise to you is that if you watch to the end of this video, you'll not only know the 8 most common habits that prevent people from building wealth, but you'll also know how I overcame each of them to reach financial freedom in my 20s. And to make it even easier for you to break these habits yourself, I made a complete guide which I linked in the video description. Habit number 1, trying to get rich by accident. You wouldn't go to a new destination without a map. Otherwise, you'd end up driving down random roads. And nobody would go into a sports competition without a coach and expect to do well. Yet, this is the exact approach that so many people are taking with their finances. They don't have a clear vision for what they want to do with their life, or even if they do have big dreams, they haven't built the daily habits that will help them get closer to their aspirations. And I felt the exact same way as a teenager. But when I discovered the early retirement community, I realized what was possible and what I had to do to get there. And that's why whenever I do coaching calls, the first question I ask is, what do you want to achieve? And then only after I know where they want to get in life, we can start making a game plan to take them from where they are today to where they actually want to be. If you don't go through this process of setting your own financial goals, it will be a lot like driving down random roads, just hoping to end up where you want to be. And if you don't then make a plan to actually achieve your goals, then it will be a lot like showing up to a sports competition without a coach. To achieve anything big, you need a clear vision of what you want and a plan to do it. But it's one thing to set a plan. It's another thing to actually achieve it. So to make sure you're on track, you have to break out of the second habit that keeps people broke. Habit number 2, trying to fix what you don't measure. When I was a kid, I was terrible with money. Like, my prior wasn't worse than any other kids. Just all kids are terrible with money. And that's why I'm so thankful that my parents instilled this one habit in me. Even before I was old enough to count money myself, I had a little note card where I would record every single penny that went in and out of my wallet. I've now upgraded from a note card to a spreadsheet, but either way, this habit has stuck with me through all of these years. By the way, you can actually get my budgeting spreadsheet in the description if you're interested. And the reason I share this story is because most people did not learn the same lesson, and it's one of the reasons that they're staying broke. That's because there are 3 really big benefits of tracking your expenses. The first is maybe the most obvious. If you don't know where your money is going, it will be extremely difficult to figure out where you can save and where you're wasting money. And something I see all of the time is people prioritize their big expenses even though it's their smaller recurring expenses that are doing way more damage and would be much easier to reduce. And the second benefit of tracking your expenses is a little more subtle. I often say that tracking your expenses alone will not fix your finances, but sometimes it will. Since I track my expenses so closely, I know exactly what I spend, and just that awareness helps me keep my expenses low. It's the same reason that you might have been told to pay with cash instead of with a credit card. It just makes you pay way more attention to your expenses. And the third benefit of recording your expenses might be the most important, but it doesn't get talked about that often. But the thing is, if you don't know what you're spending, you also don't know what it will take to retire. This is actually the reason that I track my expenses so closely. To retire in my 20s, I have to know what I spend so that I can make a good retirement plan. So tracking your expenses is a great way to make sure that you're following the game plan that you created in step 1. But even the people that do track their expenses often make another massive mistake. Habit number 3, wasting your most valuable asset. I was talking to a coworker the other day, and he said,
"Whenever I see money in my bank account, I get sad, because that means it's just sitting there instead of buying me something that I like."
And when I thought about it a little more closely, I realized that this is exactly how I used to think about money too. As a kid, the only reason that I wanted to know how much money I had in my wallet is I wanted to know how much money I could spend. In my mind, the only thing that money is good for is buying things. And that's still how most people think about money today. But let me tell you what changed my mindset. When I was 17, I discovered the Mr. Money Mustache blog. With just a 9-to-5, he retired at 31 years old with $800,000. What I realized is that your savings aren't being wasted. They're actually buying you something far more important. Every dollar you have saved and invested is buying you $1 of freedom. Savings are your FU money. If you have a job that you hate, you can look for a new one. You can take risks that you couldn't have otherwise. And if you've saved enough money, you're financially independent. So don't look at your savings and think that money is for spending. It's already buying you the most important thing it can. But most people just don't see it that way. And to make things even worse, they aren't satisfied with their current income. Habit number 4, budgeting with a balloon. There are way too many people that treat their savings like a balloon. When a balloon gets filled with air, there's still just as much rubber, but it gets thinner and thinner until it pops. That's exactly what most people do with their budget. They commit to saving a certain amount of money, and maybe that's $5,000 per year. But as their income increases, they increase their spending too. Sure, they're still saving $5,000 per year, but that $5,000 is a smaller and smaller chunk of their income. So if anything goes wrong, the balloon pops and their savings disappear extremely quickly. And that's why it's so critical that you avoid lifestyle inflation. When you earn a promotion or a raise, there are two things that you can do with your money. One option is to just keep your savings the same and live an even more expensive lifestyle. But what I do is I keep my expenses the same and only increase my savings. And that's why I'm on track to retire in less than 10 years, while most people work around 40 years. And what makes lifestyle inflation so dangerous is that even if you're saving the same amount of money every year, you're actually getting even further from financial freedom. The simple rule of thumb is that you need 25 times your annual expenses to be financially independent. And that means when your expenses go up, you need even more money to retire. So if you save $5,000 per year, you should be, after 1 year, $5,000 closer to financial freedom. But if your expenses go up by just $1,000 that year, then you need an extra $25,000 to retire. That will make you even further from financial freedom, even though you saved thousands of dollars. So if there is one thing that prevents the majority of people from reaching financial freedom, it is lifestyle inflation. And this lifestyle inflation is even more dangerous if it outpaces your income. And that brings us to habit number 5, paying for mistakes. Last year, Americans paid $120 billion and got nothing in return. That's what Americans spend on credit card interest and fees per year, which is a completely avoidable expense. But if you spend more than you have, then you're going to go into debt. And debt has a cost. I've talked a lot on this channel about investing, where you can use your money to buy assets that make even more money. It's really important because that money can snowball. So a small amount of money today can become a huge amount of money in the future. But the exact same principles apply to debt. Debt grows just like an investment does, and if you don't get rid of it, it can ruin your life. And that doesn't mean that there is never a time to take on debt. Most people have to use debt to buy a house or real estate, and that might be worth it. But apart from a mortgage, I would try to avoid debt completely. And you definitely want to avoid high interest debt like payday loans and credit cards. That debt can grow at over 20% per year, which is extremely difficult to keep up with. But you might be thinking,
Yeah, I got it. I won't go into debt.
which is awesome. But unless you break the next habit that I'm about to talk about, it might be unavoidable. Habit number 6, risking it all. If your house burnt down on the same day that you got hospitalized from a car crash, what would you do? I'm hoping your answer was not,
Oh, I just pay for it out of pocket.
because if you could afford to, you don't need to be watching this YouTube channel. But hopefully you have house insurance, car insurance, and if you live in America, medical insurance that will help cover most of those bills. Of those 3, I only have to pay for medical insurance, but that's only because I don't own a house or a car. And here's the truth about insurance. On average, you will pay a lot more money into it than you get out of it. If that weren't the case, then it wouldn't be a profitable industry. So purely based on the financials, insurance is not worth it. But what makes insurance worth it is how much it reduces your risk. A multi-billion-dollar company can afford to rebuild your house, even if you can't. Hopefully, no bad catastrophic things ever happen to you. But if one of those things does happen, it could completely derail your finances if you aren't protected. So make sure that you have insurance just to make sure that you can bounce back from your worst days. But even if you do all of the things that I've talked about, you still won't build wealth unless you break this next habit. Habit number 7, not planning for 15 years from now. If you had invested $1,000 15 years ago, then today you'd have $7,981, or hopefully even more, depending on when you're watching. So what about 15 years from today? Where do you want to be in 2030, 2040, or even 2050? That might sound like it's incredibly far away, but that's why it's so important to get started now. So many people get trapped in thinking about what they want to buy today that they don't even think about what they want to afford in 15 years from now. But the decisions you make today can have a snowball impact on your future. And that's why I'll often say that the best day to invest was yesterday, because it's so important to get started as soon as possible. And that's why I set up automatic bank transfers to my investment account, just so that I know I'm constantly investing in my future. So if you want to not be broke, you have to do more than just fixing the habits that are costing you money. You also have to proactively build wealth so that you have all of the money that you need and that you want in the future. But the biggest thing preventing people from doing that isn't actually ignorance, it's fear. Habit number 8. Not giving yourself a chance. More than 50% of Americans are afraid to invest because they don't want to lose money. But over the long run, investing has been a pretty reliable way to increase your wealth. In the vast majority of years, the stock market has finished higher than it started. But it's not just stock market gains that people are missing out on. People are afraid to learn a new skill, start their own business, or even just ask for a raise. And I struggle with the same thing. I hate taking risk. But I don't want my life to be dominated by fear. And the truth is, if it doesn't make you just a little bit afraid, it's probably not worth doing. This whole YouTube channel and my newsletter is a huge risk that I'm taking. I've spent hundreds of hours on it, but so far I've actually lost money. But I'm trying to design the life that I want in a few years from now, and that requires taking some risk today. So I hope that you won't let fear stop you from pursuing your dreams, whatever they are. And if you take this video and actually commit to breaking the habits that I've talked about, I am absolutely certain that your finances will improve. So make sure to grab the guide in the description and come back to this video whenever you need it. And you'll notice that most of the things I've talked about so far involve spending less money. But as important as frugality is, there are some things that you actually have to buy if you want to succeed financially. I made a whole video where I went through 10 different things that you have to buy to succeed financially, which I'm going to link right here.